Have you ever wondered what it takes to redevelop an abandoned old building? To renovate a property and save it for future generations while making a tidy profit along the way? I often review buildings designed by others or properties clients want to discuss during my online consultations, but in this video I'm going to take a look at one of my own projects. It's not flashy or glamorous, it hasn't won awards or got the front cover of a magazine, but I am proud of it because I used my skills to help save this old building. I'm going to show you some of the costs and pitfalls you need to be aware of if you take on an old building like this. Let's get started. The building. Most projects I take on are private homes in Edinburgh, and when they're finished, I almost never see them again. This project is one I see every day because it's in my village in Fife. The building dates from the late 19th century and it was originally built as a temperance hotel. Apparently these were popular across Scotland because travellers wanted to stay somewhere other guests wouldn't be carousing late into the night. During the 20th century, sobriety went out of fashion and the building became a Masonic lodge. They had a fully stocked bar and function room on the first floor, but most recently the building was used by a builder as an office and a store for materials. The pattern of use over time involved fewer people in the building. The heating was run less often, the doors and windows would be shut for long periods, the building wasn't ventilated, rot took hold, and damage to the fabric was not repaired. Despite the fact a builder was using the property, they never bothered to do any maintenance. The stonework needed repointing, the roof needed attention, the gutters had to be replaced, part of the ground floor had rotten away to reveal the solum, and the windows were past the point of saving. The entrance hallway did have a very fine hardwood stair, still in good condition, but that was the only feature worth talking about in the entire building. How to make this project worthwhile for everyone involved. The truth is that people usually won't spend money on old buildings unless they can get a return on the investment. My job on this project was to create spaces that potential buyers or tenants want to use, and doing it in such a way as it stood a reasonable chance of getting planning approval, comply with the building regulations, and not cost a fortune to build. Now, some architects fixate on high-end design above all else, believing that every project is an opportunity to create a masterpiece. Let's just say I think this attitude might be counterproductive. It can lead to buildings costing more than necessary and to the designer spending so much time on the project they lose money. Nobody benefits from this, and I prefer a win-win situation. The client gets a viable building and I turn a profit. My goal for this project was to get the building back into regular use. Maybe some future owner and architect could spend what it takes to turn it into a masterpiece, but my role, as I saw it, was to create the opportunity for that to happen. Even if that's 100 years from now and someone else gets all the glory, I'm okay with that. Could we knock the building and start again? The client for this project was the local pharmacy. Their original premises in the village were cramped and didn't have convenient parking for staff or customers. This old building had several advantages. It could be accessed directly off the main road, it had a large area of ground ideal for parking, and the building itself had more space than the pharmacy required. This is where the brainstorming began. During a feasibility study, the client and I arrived at the idea to have two commercial spaces on the ground floor, one being the pharmacy and the other an office for rent. The first floor and the roof could be converted into 3 new flats. It was only because we could get so much from the building that it was worth investing in. The building isn't listed and it's outside the local conservation area, so it had no special legal protection. It probably would have been possible to demolish this building and develop the site more intensively, but leaving aside the cost, which would be significant, and the local reaction, which would have been strongly against, demolishing an old building is not something I take lightly. In my view, the most sustainable building is the one that's already been built. I've spent my career adapting, refurbishing and extending older properties to ensure they continue to be used and don't have to be torn down and replaced. How does the new design work? I developed a design that did as little as possible to the existing fabric of the building. There was a badly built 20th century fire escape on the south side of the building which we didn't need in order to comply with the building regulations. This was removed to make space for accessing one of the new offices. To access the pharmacy, we cut down an existing double window at the north side of the building and created a new doorway. The original front door was kept to access the hall and stairs leading up to the new flats. We were very lucky that the original roof was large and tall enough to accommodate a habitable space. An entire two-bedroom flat fits in there. I had to create one new window on the east side of the first floor to ensure a bedroom could have natural light. I also created a service riser for new drainage and utilities running up through the building. One of the main challenges on the site was providing enough car parking. The site already had access to the public road, so we didn't need to get permission for that, but we did have to calculate the number of cars parked on the site. This was additionally difficult because the building would now be a mixed-use development, offices and pharmacy shop on the ground floor with flats upstairs. The parking calculation for flats is straightforward. The number of car parking spaces is a function of the number of bedrooms. The more beds, the more cars. For offices, however, it depends on occupancy capacity. That's the number of people in the office, and that is determined by measuring the internal floor area, then multiplying that by a load factor number read off a table in the building regulations. The load factor is also used to determine the number of toilets, and it varies depending on the type of use. Whether it's a shop, office, art gallery, hotel, or school building, they all have different load factors. The thing to know here is that you can't give a personal undertaking to use the building in a certain way so as to reduce the number of parking spaces. You can't say, I promise to only employ 2 members of staff, so I won't need all those parking spaces. Buildings last a long time. The owner could sell or lease the building to someone else who might need more staff, and the point is, the planners and building standards officers insist the building must have facilities that match the size of the space. This took a lot of back and forth, but I eventually got it to work. The building has parking spaces for the flats, office staff and customers. We also had to allocate 50 square meters of garden amenity space for each flat, which I was only just able to fit at the front of the site. Getting planning permission was a challenge. Even though the building isn't listed and is not in a conservation area, getting planning permission wasn't easy. There was a small lawnmower repair workshop next door which had permission for light industrial use. That meant the owner or tenant of the workshop could engage in noisy work which might disturb the future occupants of the flats we intended to build. The planning officer's main concern seemed to be that occupants of the flats would complain to environmental health, thus taking up valuable time and resources at the council. Of course, the occupants' own comfort also played a role in this. Exposing them to excessive noise levels was not something we wanted to do either. The workshop had every right to run their business, repairing lawnmowers. It was up to us to show we could create good quality new dwellings next door. To address this, I engaged an acoustic consultant who tested the noise levels from the workshop and produced a report on the likely decibel rating occupants would experience in the flats. To reduce the noise, the consultant recommended we specify thicker acoustic rated windows. Crucially, these windows could not have trickle vents, those little slots you see in windows and doors which allow a small amount of ventilation. Flats would still need background ventilation, and to achieve this I specified a mechanical air intake and extraction system. This draws in fresh air from the east side facing away from the workshop and then draws stale air out again. The occupants can now safely live in the flats with the windows shut and not be affected by the noise while still having fresh air to breathe. We also briefly considered building an acoustic wall along the boundary with the workshop. This would have been a 3-meter tall fence filled with dense material to absorb sound, but that was a non-starter and I talked the planning officer out of it. The officer accepted the proposal for acoustic rated windows and we got planning approval on that basis. Is the finished building a success? Construction work began in 2020 and was significantly affected by COVID, but the pharmacy opened for business in 2021 and is now an important part of the local community. My professional services didn't cover finding a builder or administering a construction contract. The client dealt with this by negotiating a price with a well-regarded local firm and managing them directly during construction. I have no problem if clients want to engage me for part of the process. Construction is the most stressful stage of any job, and if someone else wants to deal with that, I am not going to stand in their way. Construction costs back then were significantly less than they are today. In 2024, you would need at least £250,000 to take on a job like this, but it would be relatively easy to spend £500,000. If you are serious about something like this anywhere in the UK, consider booking a consultation with me. There's a link in the description and you can check out this playlist of other properties I have advised clients about. I will say that if you are thinking of managing building work yourself without professional assistance, you need to have the time and ability to do it properly. If you have a full-time job and no construction experience, this isn't for you. it makes more sense to pay someone like me to take care of it. The finished building may not be an architectural masterpiece, but I am genuinely proud that I could use my training and experience to prevent it from falling into ruin. I know the local community value having a pharmacy in the village, and they are glad the building has been given a new lease of life. Tellingly, despite all the hoops the planners made us jump through, there were no objections to the application. I know the site could have been more intensively developed, the existing building put to a different use, or more money spent on higher quality materials and finishes. But getting the building back into regular use doesn't just preserve the structure, it also preserves the ability of future generations to adapt it again to suit their own needs decades or centuries from now. Let me know what you think about this project in the comments, and as always, please give the video a like. It really helps the channel.